not yet married, you'll get to see now how this plays out. I've been silent for some time. Be silenced again. Since we're in an academic institution, there are two conceits that we can indulge in, although normally we don't like to use academic phrases. The first is to restructure your syntax, because we think that justice is not a noun but a verb, requiring some commitment, some struggle. No justice comes with that. The second is to at least give you some perspective on the area in which we work and the changes that affect how we view the world and how we view the concept of justice. Because after World War I, there was a change in the law. And there's a professor at Princeton named Paul who uses a phrase that I like, normative architecture. It's just a combination of two words, norm and architecture. It's a different way of looking at the world. And there are three documents, lawyers call them instruments, just so they're starting to be. Three documents that are really critical. The first, of course, is the London Charter, which permitted the trial of the Nuremberg defendants. And there are two things that come out of the London Charter that are absolutely critical. One is the concept of crimes against humanity, the notion that there's a separate crime for attacking civilian population. And embedded within the definition of crimes against humanity is the idea that a nation cannot justify its own service in engaging in this conflict. In other words, the fact that the Nazis passed laws legalizing the maintenance of concentration camps, the fact that there were orders signed requiring German soldiers to kill prisoners of war, that didn't make it legal. And not only is national law not permitted to justify these conduct, but there is international law which trumps national law and can provide for the punishment of persons who violate. It's a critical notion. It's a revolutionary idea. Even now, there are those who resist it. Part of the challenge for us in the Darfur is that there are nation-states that think that President Bashir should not be put in the dock because somehow it's an affront to sovereignty, the right that nation-states should do what they do. So that idea came out of the mass horrors and slaughter, primarily but not exclusively perpetrated by the Third Reich and the Japanese Empire in World War II. The second event, and it's equally important, is the idea of human rights. I'm not allowed to tell you my age because one thinks that reflects badly on her. But in fact, I was 64. I was born the year Miss Fiore graduated from school and started teaching here. She was my second grade teacher. She can't fill up with this evaluation. That part is done. The idea of human rights is no older than mine. It came out of the same experience of the thousands who were slaughtered, and it's based on the conceit, the idea that if a nation is allowed to, party is allowed to enslave its own population, to destroy the opposition, to deprive people of their will and will, they're much more likely to be aggressors in the international community. And so, something that probably couldn't have been done at any other time in our modern history. It was an agreement on some basic norms. International law says you have a right to a fair trial. International law says you have a right to work, to free assembly. International law, and in theory at least, there can be international mechanisms to enforce them against a state that even deprives its own citizens of those rights. That is the fundamental change in how we see law, and how we see nation states, and how we see ways for what is sometimes fictionally referred to as the opinion of mankind to have a real and practical effect in people's lives. But it only has an effect if there's that struggle in these things. Because by now, one of the big changes from 1946 to now, 1948, is that virtually every nation in the world accepts rhetorically, in theory, that it should be guided by principles of human rights. There's no nation which is. And yet many nations, including many of our allies, including those in the news today, Yemen, Egypt, Tunisia, Jordan, our State Department issues a report on human rights. That you should read it. Those nations are called by our State Department as poor guardians and violators of basic human rights. So there's sometimes a gap between our norms and our behavior, but that's what the struggle. And so I want you to understand that one of our biases, I'm going to briefly mention the UN Charter because we could go off and talk on that another day. But one other part of the law that's really important, and we had hoped before these amazing events that Egypt to spend more time on this, perhaps we'll come talk to you another time. You treat us so wonderfully, we'll probably be coming back here. Sexual crimes as war crimes. That is, post-World War II, particularly in the ad hoc tribunals and the International Criminal Court, were viewed as a special category of war crimes. That is, now the term ordinary crime is not meant to be an insult. But if someone were to walk out in the street and be sexually assaulted, it's an ordinary crime. Horrible enough, and with serious penalty as it should. In the context of war, sexual assaults and the taking of women as wives against their will are frequently instruments of terror. If you cow a population by demonstrating you cannot even protect the family structure, that fetuses will be torn from women's bodies, that people will be violated sexually. And so there's a special concern in the statute of the International Criminal Court and the international law for sex crimes. One of the things that sort of the run-up to what happened in Egypt was in 2004. Well, the Egyptian government had long denied they tortured anyone. It was a videotape, certainly. It was from the blog of a man who was being sexually violated by Egyptian investigators. They made the tape themselves in order to foment terror against others, but it got on the blog. And so the widespread use of sexual insult as a weapon of violation of human rights and the laws of war is something that it too is an area of special concern and one of the sea changes that's happened since World War II.
It's good if you're a wife to have a remote. Sierra Leone. In Sierra Leone, forced marriage was a particular concern of the tribunal. Most of the leaders of the rebel and other groups who were charged in Sierra Leone in the special court there had taken bush wives. We represented Mars Cologne. Mars Cologne is in that photo at the top on the right. Mars Cologne was a reputed member of the Revolutionary United Front, a rebel group. We got the call because we are African Americans, and Cologne had fired all of his counsel, all European from common law jurisdictions. And he said that he wanted black lawyers and he wanted African American lawyers who were steeped in knowledge of the American Civil Rights Movement. One of our proteges, who's now heading up the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, called us. And she wanted range. And that was fine. We had only been married a short time. And I know what life is like in international tribunal. Oh, yes. But Simone had indicated that there was another need because there were going to be many witnesses who were former child soldiers, and the issue of how they were conscripted to be in the rebel armies was an issue. And they wanted someone who could humanize this aspect of the defense. And then there were those bushwhackers. Well, how could we find a defense to the Revolutionary United Front leaders having bushwhackers? Well, that's where I came in. And it was quite an experience to talk to these women who literally did not want to see their bush husbands, the leaders, prosecuted, because these women living in the poorest country in the world that the UNDP indicated at the time this trial opened in 2004, said that they were our means of survival. When the RUF came to our village, we knew that if we had a young girl who had an interest and who we could stoke an interest in the rebel leader, that not only would she eat, but her whole family would eat, and perhaps the whole village would